I don't know about other countries, but in my country of Canada, there's an increasing obsession, evidenced by endless numbers of news stories, with the plight of refugees around the world. And of course, refugees who flee desperate circumstances and come to Canada to settle, and we are concerned about the aftermath. But it occurs to me, as I watch this coverage of refugees, that there's a whole category of humankind to which we pay very little attention. And it's called internally displaced persons, or in the language of the UN, IDPs. These are people who flee their homes, but not their countries. And according to the most recent estimates, there were some 40 million of them in 2017. Now you can intuit, you can imagine the psychological, emotional, cultural, social consequences of this mass movement of persons. But one of the things we haven't been able to do until now is to measure the economic costs of internally displaced persons. After all, they lose their livelihood, their jobs, their housing, their food, their health costs, their education. They are completely uprooted in another part of their country and are fighting for survival. And we haven't been able to measure the economic costs of that survival until recently, until something called the Displacement Monitoring Service, based in Geneva, I didn't know they existed, looked very carefully at all of those factors associated with IDPs and came to the conclusion that it costs $310 per year per IDP. And they measured it on the basis of an eclectic survey of around 8 countries. They looked at the Central African Republic, they looked at Haiti, at Libya, at the Philippines, at Somalia, at South Sudan, at Yemen, and at the Ukraine. And they looked at the underlying factors of conflict and of climate change, drought, flooding, hurricanes, earthquakes, and they came to that figure of $310 per person to cover everything from livelihood to health. And when you multiply it by the number of IDPs in the world, it's $13 billion per year. Now that's a figure you can hardly get your mind around. It's impossible. It's too remote to be able to absorb. But what you can absorb is the fact that most of those costs will have to be borne by Western industrial democracies out of our foreign aid budgets. And those foreign aid budgets are contracting mercilessly. So it feels as though you have tens of millions of people marching blindfolded into Armageddon. It's as though the whole world cares more about congressional testimony against Donald Trump than it cares about tens of millions of people living lives of desperation. That was last week. I'm Stephen Lewis.